The first thing Rachel Mercer noticed was not the phone. It was the silence. For 8 years, Daniel had filled their evenings with small, ordinary sounds. He hummed while washing dishes, complained about the weather, and told her stories about customers at the garage. Lately, those sounds had disappeared. He came home quieter, ate quickly, and disappeared into the spare room with his phone. At first, Rachel blamed exhaustion. Daniel had always worked hard, and she knew the garage had been busy. But exhaustion did not explain the way he turned his screen away whenever she entered a room. One Tuesday evening, Rachel found him standing beside the kitchen window, typing rapidly. He noticed her reflection in the glass. His thumb stopped. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Nothing." The answer came too quickly. Daniel slipped the phone into his pocket and smiled. It was the same reassuring smile he had used for years, but something about it felt rehearsed now. Rachel dried her hands and watched him walk away. She told herself she was imagining things. That explanation became harder to believe over the following weeks. Daniel changed the password on his phone. He began taking it into the shower. When messages arrived, he checked them immediately, then deleted them. Once, Rachel asked who had been calling so late. "Work," he said. "Work calls at midnight." "Sometimes." She wanted to argue, but his expression stopped her. There was irritation beneath the calm. Then came the small lies. He said he had stayed late at the garage when a receipt showed he had bought coffee across town. He claimed a customer had borrowed his car, although the driver's seat had been adjusted to a different position. None of it proved anything. Yet together, the details formed a pattern Rachel could not ignore. She began watching him without meaning to. Daniel noticed. Their conversations became careful exchanges between two people afraid of saying the wrong thing. At night, he slept beside her with his back turned. One night, rain tapped against the bedroom window while Daniel slept. His phone vibrated on the bedside table. Rachel opened her eyes. Daniel did not move. The screen lit the darkness for only a moment, but it was enough. A message. Rachel saw the name before Daniel woke. Maya? Her younger sister. Her heart seemed to stop. Daniel reached for the phone instantly. He read the message, glanced at Rachel, and deleted it. "What did Maya want?" Rachel whispered. "Nothing." Rachel stared at him. Daniel turned away. For several seconds, neither spoke. Eventually, his breathing became slow and regular. He pretended to sleep. Rachel remained awake. She remembered Maya laughing at their wedding, standing beside her in a pale dress, and holding her bouquet. She remembered Daniel embracing Maya afterward, calling her family. At the time, the memory had seemed harmless. Now it felt different. Rachel wondered how many moments she had dismissed because she trusted them both. She looked at the dark outline of her husband's face, and tried to remember when trust had begun feeling like suspicion. Maya was her sister. Daniel was her husband. They were the two people she should have trusted most. And now, lying in the darkness between them, Rachel understood something she was not yet ready to say aloud. Whatever Daniel was hiding had a face she knew. And that possibility was far more frightening than any stranger. Outside, the rain grew heavier. Inside, Rachel made a silent decision. Tomorrow, she would start looking for answers, quietly, carefully, before Daniel realized she was searching for the truth herself. The next morning, Rachel woke before Daniel. She said nothing about the message. Instead, she watched him dress, tie his shoes, and leave for work with the same calm expression he had worn every morning for years. But something had changed inside her. She had made a decision during the night. She would pay attention. Maya was the first person she thought about. Rachel's younger sister had always seemed fearless. Maya could walk into a crowded room and somehow become its center. She laughed loudly, spoke without hesitation, and rarely admitted when anything hurt her. Yet Rachel knew there was another side to her. Maya had struggled after their parents' divorce. She had moved from one uncertain relationship to another, searching for reassurance she never seemed able to keep. Rachel often tried to protect her, but protection sometimes created distance. Daniel noticed that distance. At family dinners, he listened when Maya spoke about her problems. When Rachel was busy preparing food or answering calls, Daniel would stay behind and continue the conversation. At first, it was innocent. Maya remembered those evenings differently now. Daniel never rushed to judge her. He asked questions. He remembered details. When she mentioned feeling invisible, he told her she mattered. When she doubted herself, he reminded her of everything she was capable of becoming. Those words became important to her. Too important. The first boundary disappeared almost unnoticed. A private message became a late-night conversation. A conversation became a meeting. Eventually, Maya found herself sitting across from Daniel in a quiet restaurant, knowing they were doing something they could never explain to Rachel. She should have stopped it. Instead, she believed Daniel's promises. He told her that his marriage had been complicated long before she entered his life. He said Rachel no longer understood him. He said Maya was different. For a while, Maya believed she was loved. But Daniel's affection slowly changed into control. He questioned where she went. He became angry when she failed to answer quickly. He demanded secrecy, then punished her emotionally whenever she talked about ending the relationship. Months later, Rachel began noticing the tension. At Sunday dinner, Maya arrived late. The moment Daniel entered the room, Maya stopped talking. Rachel looked from one face to the other. "Is everything okay?" she asked. "Fine," Maya replied. Daniel answered at the same time. "Of course." The words sounded harmless. Their eyes did not. After dinner, Rachel found Maya alone in the hallway. "You've been avoiding me." Maya looked startled. "I haven't. You won't even look at me when Daniel is around." Maya swallowed. "I'm just tired." Rachel wanted to press harder, but Maya walked away. That night, Maya met Daniel privately. She looked exhausted. "I'm scared," she said. Daniel stared at her without speaking. "I can't keep doing this," Maya continued. "Rachel is noticing. I feel like everything is falling apart." Daniel's expression hardened. "You knew what this was. I thought you cared about me." "I do." "Then let me go." For several seconds, Daniel said nothing. Then he stepped closer. "You don't get to decide when this ends." Maya's face went pale. "Daniel, please." His voice became quiet. "If you tell Rachel, you won't just destroy my marriage. You'll destroy your relationship with her too." Maya stared at him, finally seeing the thread beneath his calmness. She had believed their secret belonged to both of them. Now she understood that Daniel believed it belonged to him. For the first time, Maya wondered whether Daniel had ever loved her, or simply learned how to control her. And as Maya walked away, frightened and uncertain, she realized she was no longer trying to protect their secret. She was trying to escape it. The fear Maya had carried out of Daniel's house followed her into the following week. She tried to convince herself that distance would make things clearer. Instead, every unanswered question seemed to grow heavier. She stopped returning calls, avoided family dinners, and spent long evenings staring at her phone without having the courage to contact Rachel. Then came the appointment. The doctor spoke gently, carefully, leaving pauses between sentences. Maya heard the words, but they seemed to arrive from somewhere far away. Her test was positive for HIV. For several seconds, Maya could not move. She stared at the floor, waiting for someone to tell her there had been a mistake. The room remained painfully ordinary. A clock continued ticking. A printer hummed somewhere beyond the door. Outside, People walked past the window carrying coffee and talking about their day. Maya felt as though her life had stopped. She asked questions, listened to explanations, and received information she could barely process. The diagnosis did not erase her future, but in that moment, fear was louder than everything else. She imagined judgment, rejection, and Rachel discovering every secret at once. On the drive home, she cried without making a sound. Then the questions began. Maya mentally retraced the months before the diagnosis. She remembered her relationships, conversations, and moments she had never thought twice about. Nothing gave her an answer. Then Daniel's face appeared in her mind. She remembered how controlling he had become whenever she mentioned their affair. She remembered his sudden insistence that she trust him. She remembered one conversation in which he had told her that certain things were better left unexplored. At the time, she had thought he was protecting them. Now the memory frightened her. That evening, Maya called Daniel. "We need to talk." He sounded annoyed. "About what?" "My test." There was a pause. "What test?" "You know exactly what I mean." Daniel's voice became careful. "Maya, slow down. I tested positive." Silence filled the line. Maya waited for shock. She expected concern. Instead, Daniel's response was strangely controlled. "You should talk to your doctor before assuming anything." "I did." "This doesn't prove anything about me." "I never said it did." "You're thinking it." Maya's hand tightened around the phone. "Did you know?" Daniel immediately denied it. "No." But the answer came too quickly. Maya remembered every warning she had ignored. His secrecy. His sudden defensiveness. The way he had reacted whenever she questioned him. "I want the truth," she whispered. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Then I'll tell Rachel everything." Daniel's tone changed. "Don't." It was the first time Maya had heard genuine fear in his voice. "You can't threaten me anymore," she said. "I'm not threatening you." "You are?" Daniel lowered his voice. "If you tell Rachel, think about what happens next. She'll know you slept with her husband. Your family will know. Everyone will know." Maya closed her eyes. "I have nothing left to lose." Daniel's voice became colder. "You have more to lose than you think." The call ended. Maya sat alone in the darkness, trembling. She had spent months believing Daniel was hiding their affair because he was ashamed. Now another possibility entered her mind. Maybe he had been hiding something else. Something he knew long before she did. She looked through their old messages again, searching for anything she had overlooked. There were affectionate words, apologies, and promises, but also strange gaps where conversations had been deleted. One message from Daniel suddenly seemed different. He had once asked whether she had been seeing anyone else, and when she answered no, he had replied that he already knew. At the time, she had interpreted it as jealousy. Now it sounded like knowledge. He had known something. And for the first time, Maya understood what truly terrified her. Daniel might have known far more than he had ever admitted. The realization that Daniel might have known more than he admitted did not leave Maya when morning came. It followed her into every room, into every quiet moment, and even into the memories she once considered safe. She wanted to call Rachel, but fear kept her silent. Across town, Rachel was beginning her own search for answers. She had started noticing details that would once have seemed meaningless. Daniel's explanations no longer matched the evidence around him. One evening, he said he had spent the afternoon repairing a customer's truck. Later, Rachel found a receipt showing he had been somewhere else. When she asked about it, Daniel barely looked up. "The customer paid cash," he said. "I probably stopped somewhere afterward." Rachel nodded, pretending to accept the explanation. But she remembered it. Another evening, she noticed a conversation had disappeared from Daniel's phone. She asked whether he had deleted something. Old messages, he replied. Why? They were useless. His answer was casual, but his eyes were not. Rachel began keeping small notes in a drawer beside her bed. Times, places, explanations. Nothing was proof by itself. Together, however, the inconsistencies were becoming impossible to ignore. Then she noticed unusual withdrawals from their joint account. The amounts were not enormous, but they appeared repeatedly. Daniel claimed they were expenses connected to the garage. Rachel checked the dates and discovered that several withdrawals happened on days when the garage had been closed. She said nothing. Instead, she watched. Meanwhile, Maya disappeared from family life. She stopped attending Sunday dinners. She ignored calls and answered messages with brief excuses. Rachel worried about her, but every attempt to get closer seemed to make Maya retreat further. One afternoon, Rachel called. Maya, please tell me what's happening. I'm just tired. You've been tired for weeks. There was silence. Rachel lowered her voice. Is Daniel involved? Maya's breathing changed. No. The answer sounded frightened rather than convincing. After the call, Maya sat alone on her bed and cried. She wanted to tell Rachel everything. She wanted her sister to know what Daniel had done, what he had said, and how frightened she had become. But Daniel's warnings echoed in her mind. Rachel would hate her. Rachel would blame her. Rachel would see her as the woman who had betrayed her. Daniel had repeated those fears until Maya almost believed them. When he contacted her again, she nearly refused to answer. You need to calm down, he told her. You don't understand. I understand exactly. No, you don't. Daniel sighed. If Rachel finds out, your relationship with her is finished. Maya said nothing. You know how she is, he continued. She'll never forgive you. Maya closed her eyes. He had found the one fear she could not escape. But something inside her had changed. She no longer trusted his words. During their next meeting, Maya placed her phone beneath her coat before entering the room. She was not planning revenge. She did not know what she would do with the recording. She simply needed proof that she was not imagining the threats. Daniel spoke for several minutes, repeating that she should remain silent. Then Maya asked the question that had haunted her since the diagnosis. How did you know? Daniel looked at her. Know what? That I was sick. His expression changed. Only for a second. Then he smiled. I know more about you than you think. Maya's blood ran cold. She kept the phone still. Daniel continued speaking, unaware that every word was being recorded. And when Maya finally left, she understood that the recording might contain the first real evidence of what Daniel had done. And that frightened her deeply. For the first time, she was no longer carrying only fear. She was carrying proof. The proof Maya was carrying had barely become real when Rachel found her own. It happened on an ordinary Thursday evening. Daniel was in the shower when his phone vibrated on the kitchen counter. Rachel glanced toward it, expecting another work message. Instead, the screen showed a notification from an unfamiliar number. She hesitated. Then another notification appeared, this time from a cloud storage account Daniel had forgotten to close. Rachel opened it. The first photograph made her stop breathing. Daniel was standing beside Maya. They were not at a family gathering. They were outside a small restaurant across town, smiling at each other with an intimacy Rachel had never seen between them. She stared at the image until the screen blurred. Then she found another. And another. Different places. Different days. The same secret closeness. Rachel's hands began shaking. She wanted to confront Daniel immediately, but something stopped her. Anger was screaming inside her, yet beneath it was a colder instinct. Find everything. She searched quietly. Deleted messages appeared in a recovered folder. Some were ordinary. Others were unmistakably intimate. There were apologies, secret meeting arrangements, and messages from Maya asking Daniel why he was avoiding her. Rachel read them with tears running down her face. The betrayal was no longer a suspicion. It was a fact. Worse, several messages matched the dates Daniel had claimed to be working late. Rachel checked the financial records again. Restaurant payments, hotel charges, fuel purchases from locations he had never mentioned. Every discovery made the marriage feel less real. That night, Rachel watched Daniel sleep and wondered how many times he had kissed her after seeing Maya. The thought made her sick. She still said nothing. Instead, she waited until Daniel left for work and called Maya. "Can you come over?" Maya's silence lasted several seconds. "Yes." When Maya arrived, Rachel did not accuse her immediately. She placed the photographs on the table. Maya looked at them. Her face collapsed. Rachel whispered, "Tell me I'm wrong." Maya began crying. "I'm sorry." Those two words destroyed whatever remained between them. Rachel stood abruptly. "You slept with my husband?" Maya could barely speak. "Yes." Rachel turned away, covering her mouth as years of trust shattered in seconds. "How long?" Maya answered quietly. "Months." Rachel's anger became almost unbearable. "You were my sister." "I know." "You knew what he meant to me." "I know." "Then why?" Maya had no answer that could repair the damage. Finally, she told Rachel about the diagnosis. Rachel froze. "I tested positive for HIV," Maya said. The room became completely silent. Rachel stared at her sister, unable to understand how one conversation could contain so much destruction. Maya continued, voice trembling. "I don't know exactly how it happened. But Daniel knew something. He became controlling. He threatened me. He made me afraid to tell you." Rachel struggled to process the words. "You think Daniel deliberately infected you?" "I think he knew what he was doing." Rachel shook her head. "That is an accusation you can't make without proof." "I know." Maya reached into her bag and removed her phone. "I recorded him." Rachel looked at the screen. Maya pressed play. Daniel's voice filled the room. Calm. Familiar. Unmistakable. Rachel's face went pale as his words continued. Then came the sentence that changed everything. "I know more about you than you think." Rachel looked at Maya. Rachel listened again, this time without looking away. She heard the confidence in Daniel's voice, the absence of surprise, and the quiet certainty behind his words. Maya watched her sister carefully, terrified that the truth would finally destroy them both beyond repair entirely. For the first time, the affair was no longer the only secret. There was something darker beneath it. And suddenly, Rachel understood that discovering Daniel's betrayal might have been only the beginning. The recording changed everything, but it did not answer the question Rachel could not escape. How long had Daniel been capable of this? She began looking backward. Instead of confronting him immediately, Rachel searched quietly for people who had known him before their marriage. She found an old coworker from the garage and, through him, a former girlfriend. Their stories were uncomfortable because neither person knew about the other. The coworker remembered Daniel as charming but controlling. He disliked being questioned and could turn small disagreements into personal attacks. The former girlfriend described jealousy, accusations, and long arguments whenever she spent time with other people. "He always needed to know where I was," she told Rachel. "If I couldn't answer, he made me feel guilty." Rachel sat silently after the call. Those words sounded familiar. Daniel had once asked why she needed lunch with an old friend. He had insisted on knowing when she would return from shopping. At the time, she had interpreted those questions as concern. Now they looked different. Memory became a courtroom. The anniversary dinner she had once considered romantic suddenly seemed like an interrogation because Daniel had spent half the evening asking about a male colleague. The flowers he had sent after arguments felt less like apologies and more like ways of ending conversations before she could ask difficult questions. Rachel began wondering whether she had loved Daniel or simply loved the version of him he had carefully created. Daniel noticed the change. One evening, he came home carrying flowers. "I know things have been difficult," he said. Rachel stared at him. "I want us to be okay." For a moment, she almost broke. Then Daniel mentioned Maya. "She is hurting you," he said. "She's confused, Rachel. You can't believe everything she says." Rachel said nothing. He moved closer. "I made mistakes, but I never wanted to destroy our marriage." The apology sounded convincing. Daniel cried. He held her hand. He reminded her of their wedding, their first home, and every difficult year they had survived together. For one dangerous moment, Rachel wondered whether Maya had misunderstood everything. Then Daniel's voice changed. "You've been investigating me." Rachel froze. "I don't know what you mean. Don't lie to me." The tenderness disappeared. Daniel accused her of invading his privacy, poisoning their marriage, and trusting Maya over her own husband. Then, minutes later, he apologized again. The emotional whiplash left Rachel exhausted. That night, she almost deleted the notes she had kept. Then she found another piece of evidence. A payment receipt hidden among Daniel's paperwork placed him at a location near Maya's apartment on a day he had sworn he was at work. Rachel stared at the date. It was the same day Maya said Daniel had threatened her. The lie was undeniable. When Rachel confronted him, Daniel became frighteningly calm. "You need to think carefully," he said. "About what?" "About what happens if you expose me." Rachel felt a chill. Daniel continued, "This won't only hurt me. Everyone in this family will suffer." There was no apology now. No affection. Only warning. Rachel finally understood. Her marriage was not simply broken. It was dangerous. And the next time Daniel saw Maya, Rachel feared, he might decide that silence required something far more permanent. Rachel did not sleep. She sat beside the window, reading the receipt while the house remained silent behind her. She thought about calling the police, but she hesitated. She had no idea what Daniel might do if he discovered that she had reached that point. Fear had become another weapon in the house, invisible but present in every room. Before dawn, Rachel opened her phone and created a folder. She copied every photograph, message, receipt, and recording into it. Then she sent the files to an account Daniel did not know existed. For the first time, she was not investigating because she wanted answers. She was preparing herself for whatever came next. The files Rachel had hidden before dawn became the reason Maya finally decided to stop running. For days, Maya had lived between fear and guilt. She knew Rachel deserved the truth, not fragments whispered through telephone calls or frightened confessions. If Daniel had manipulated her, silence was helping him. So Maya gathered everything. The recording was first. Then the messages, photographs, dates, and notes she had written after each meeting with Daniel. She created a timeline, marking when their relationship had begun, when Daniel's behavior changed, and when he had started threatening her. She stared at the collection. It looked less like evidence of an affair and more like evidence of a life slowly being dismantled. Maya called Rachel. "I have everything," she said. Rachel's voice was quiet. "Then bring it to me," Maya agreed. She never made it to the door. Daniel was standing outside. Maya froze. He entered without waiting for permission, his expression controlled, but his eyes burning with anger. "You were going to tell her!" Maya stepped backward. "Yes." Daniel closed the door. "You promised." I promised because I was afraid of you. His jaw tightened. You knew what would happen. You destroyed my life. I gave you everything. You gave me lies. Daniel laughed bitterly. You betrayed me first. You threatened to expose us. Because you wouldn't let me leave. You knew what you were doing. So did you. Their voices rose. Maya accused him of manipulating her, isolating her, and using her fear against her. Daniel accused Maya of ruining his marriage and pretending to be a victim after getting what she wanted. Then Maya shouted the words she had been carrying for months. You betrayed Rachel before I ever betrayed her. The room fell silent. Neither noticed the front door opening. Rachel stood there. She had come because Maya stopped answering her phone. Now she heard enough to understand that the confrontation was no longer private at all. Daniel turned toward her. Rachel, listen to me. She looked at Maya first, then at him. Daniel immediately changed his expression. This is what I've been trying to tell you. They're working together. Rachel stared at him. What? Maya wants revenge. She knows you're angry with me, so she's using that against us. Maya shook her head. No. He's lying. Daniel stepped closer to Rachel. She has been manipulating you from the beginning. Rachel's voice remained steady. Then why were you with her? Daniel hesitated. Only for a moment. But Rachel saw it. She saw the hesitation and calculation behind his eyes. Maya reached for the phone containing the recording. I can prove it. Daniel's face hardened. Don't. Rachel looked at him. That single word told her more than any explanation could have. She took Maya's phone. Daniel stood between them for several seconds, breathing heavily. Then he turned toward the door. This isn't over, he said. Rachel did not answer. The door slammed behind him. Silence returned. Maya lowered herself into a chair, trembling. Rachel sat beside her. For the first time, neither sister knew what to say. Maya looked toward the closed door. If something happens to me, she whispered, don't believe him. Rachel took her hand. I won't. Outside, Daniel walked into the darkness. Inside, Rachel listened to the recording again. This time, she heard something she had missed before. Behind Daniel's voice, faintly in the background, was another sound. A door closing. Then a man's voice saying something Maya had never mentioned. Rachel stopped the recording. She looked at her sister. Maya, she whispered, where were you when he said this? Maya's face went pale, because she recognized the place. And suddenly, the secret was leading somewhere neither sister had expected. The recording had barely ended when Maya stood. I need to go, she said. Rachel caught her wrist. You shouldn't leave alone. I'll be careful. She grabbed her coat and disappeared through the door before Rachel could argue. Outside, the evening had turned cold, and darkness was settling over the street. 20 minutes later, Rachel's phone vibrated. Maya had sent a message. He's following me. I think he knows where I am. Please don't call me. Rachel immediately called. No answer. She called again. Still nothing. A third call went straight to voicemail. Then another message appeared. If anything happens, check the old property. Rachel's stomach tightened. She knew exactly what Maya meant. Daniel owned a neglected piece of land outside town, a place he rarely mentioned. Rachel had only been there once, years earlier, and remembered the abandoned house standing beyond a line of trees. She called Daniel. Where is Maya? He was silent for a moment. I don't know. When did you last see her? Earlier today. Rachel heard something in his voice. You're lying. Rachel, I'm tired of these accusations. Where are you? At home. She looked through the window. Daniel's driveway was empty. Then where's your car? Silence. Rachel's pulse quickened. I told you I'm home. You're not. Daniel ended the call. Rachel stood frozen beside the window. She grabbed her keys and drove toward the old property. The road became narrower as the town disappeared behind her. Trees crowded both sides, their branches moving against the night wind. Rachel's headlights swept across empty fields before finally revealing the broken gate. Daniel's vehicle stood beyond it. The engine was off. One door was open. Rachel stopped. For several seconds, she remained inside her car, listening to the ticking engine. Then she stepped outside. The property was silent. Too silent. She heard something from the abandoned house. A crash. Then a voice. Maya? Rachel ran toward the building. Inside, the air smelled of dust and damp wood. A light flickered somewhere deeper in the house. Then she heard shouting. Daniel's voice. You should have stayed quiet. Maya screamed back. You ruined everything. A violent struggle followed. Rachel moved toward the sound, but another crash shook the hallway. She saw two shadows collide behind a doorway. Then came a terrible silence. Rachel froze. Seconds later, Daniel emerged. His shirt was torn. Blood covered one sleeve. He stared at Rachel. You shouldn't be here. Behind him, Maya lay motionless. Rachel screamed. Daniel claimed Maya had attacked him. He said he had tried to defend himself, but his explanation came too quickly, and nothing about the room supported it. The police arrived minutes later. They found blood across the floor, overturned furniture, and evidence of a struggle. Maya was dead. Daniel was alive. But he was not telling the truth. Detectives separated him from Rachel and began documenting the scene. Daniel repeated that Maya had become unstable, attacked him, and caused the confrontation. Rachel listened from outside. She remembered the threats. She remembered the recordings. She remembered Maya's final warning. Then an officer called her name. Something had been found near the back entrance. Rachel approached slowly. Beside the doorway was a small bag containing gloves, cleaning materials, and several sealed plastic containers. Rachel stared at them. Those items had not been grabbed during a sudden argument. They had been brought there, prepared beforehand. Someone had expected blood. Someone had expected evidence. Do you recognize these? She shook her head. No, but Daniel does. Her voice trembled as she explained what had happened. The detective listened, then looked toward the house. Inside, an officer photographed footprints near the rear doorway. A broken phone lay beneath a chair. Its screen was cracked, but the recording application remained open. Rachel understood why Maya had sent that message. She had known she was being followed. And perhaps she had known she might not survive at all. Rachel looked at the blood on the floor, then at the arranged supplies. The murder had not begun with a struggle. It had begun earlier, when someone decided that the evidence would have to vanish. The night at the old property left behind more questions than answers. By morning, detectives had transformed the abandoned house into a maze of evidence markers, photographs, and numbered bags. Daniel's version of events was simple. Maya had confronted him, attacked him, and he had fought back in self-defense. He insisted that her death had been an accident, but the evidence refused to cooperate. Investigators reconstructed the hours before the confrontation using phone records and surveillance footage. Maya's phone showed repeated attempts to contact Rachel. Daniel's phone placed him near the property before Maya arrived. A camera at a roadside business captured his vehicle traveling toward the old house much earlier than he claimed. Then came the financial records. Daniel had purchased several ordinary household items earlier that afternoon. Individually, none seemed important. Together, their timing suggested preparation. Investigators also discovered that he had withdrawn cash and visited a storage facility near the property. When questioned, Daniel offered explanations for everything. "I was cleaning the place," he said. The detective across the table looked at him. "Before Maya arrived?" "Yes." "Why did you need cleaning supplies?" Daniel paused. "I told you. I was cleaning." The answer sounded rehearsed. Meanwhile, Rachel sat in a separate interview room, trying to understand how her life had become a police investigation. She described the affair, the threats, the recording, and Maya's final warning. Speaking the details aloud made them feel more real. She remembered every time Daniel had kissed her forehead after lying to her. Every time he had told her she was imagining things. Now detectives were asking whether she believed he was capable of murder. Rachel could barely answer. "I don't know who he is anymore," the investigators continued. They found messages Daniel had deleted shortly before the confrontation. Some had been recovered from backups. Others were incomplete, but even fragments revealed attempts to pressure Maya into silence. One message was particularly disturbing. "You know what happens if you make this public." There was no direct mention of murder. There did not need to be. The evidence suggested Daniel had been managing Maya's fear long before the night she died. Then detectives examined the damaged phone found inside the house. Maya's recording was still partially recoverable. At first, it seemed to contain only the same argument Rachel had already heard. Then investigators noticed a section near the beginning that Rachel had never heard. Daniel was speaking calmly. He was discussing Maya's diagnosis before she had told him about it. A detective replayed the audio. "How did you know?" Maya asked. Daniel answered with unsettling confidence. "I knew before you did." Rachel covered her mouth. The room seemed to disappear around her. That sentence changed the investigation. It did not prove every suspicion, but it established something crucial. Daniel had knowledge he should not have possessed, and he had concealed that knowledge from Maya. Investigators began examining the timeline surrounding her diagnosis. They reviewed communications, appointments, financial records, and Daniel's movements. They were no longer investigating only a murder. They were investigating a pattern. Rachel finally understood the terrifying possibility. Maya's death might not have been the crime that created Daniel's secrets. It might have been the crime committed to protect them. One detective placed a photograph of Daniel's vehicle on the table beside the recovered recording. "Look at the dates," he said. Rachel did. The dates formed a pattern stretching back months. Daniel had been lying before Maya disappeared. He had been manipulating her before the confrontation. He had been preparing the property before the murder. And suddenly, the investigators had a new question. What had Daniel been planning before anyone knew Maya was in danger? The answer waited somewhere inside his past. The detectives began pulling older records, contacting former acquaintances, and examining every unexplained gap in Daniel's history. The murder had become only one piece of a larger puzzle. And the deeper they looked, the clearer it became that Maya's death was not the beginning of Daniel's crime. It was the final stage of a plan that had started long before that terrible night. The truth was no longer hiding inside one night. It was buried across years of deception. The full history finally comes together, and what once looked like a series of disconnected lies begins to form one disturbing pattern. Daniel had not simply been hiding an affair. He had been maintaining separate versions of himself, carefully adjusting his behavior depending on who was standing in front of him. To Rachel, he presented himself as a devoted husband, dependable and familiar, someone she believed she understood. To Maya, he became a secret lover, offering attention, promises, and emotional reassurance while keeping their relationship hidden. But whenever someone threatened his control, another side emerged, calculating, manipulative, and willing to use fear as a weapon. That distinction becomes important as investigators examine everything Daniel knew about Maya. They established that Daniel was aware of her HIV diagnosis. Instead of treating that knowledge with compassion or protecting her privacy, he recognized the fear surrounding her condition and used it to make her feel trapped. The investigation does not depend on sensationalizing the medical details. The deeper issue is what Daniel did with information that Maya trusted him to handle responsibly. He turned a deeply personal vulnerability into leverage, creating another reason for her to remain silent and another way for him to maintain power over her. For Maya, the diagnosis had already carried an emotional burden. Daniel understood that burden, and according to the evidence, he knew exactly where her fears could be exploited. Every conversation, every threat, and every reassurance now takes on a different meaning when investigators view it as part of a larger pattern. What might once have seemed like private relationship drama begins to look more deliberate. Rachel, meanwhile, is forced to confront a painful reality. The man she believed she knew had repeatedly lied about where he had been, who he had contacted, and what he knew. These were not isolated inconsistencies that could easily be explained away. Each discovery added another crack to the image Daniel had spent years protecting. Rachel was not simply learning that her husband had secrets. She was learning that he had built his life around keeping different people from seeing the same truth. Then investigators uncover something even more troubling. Evidence suggests Daniel attempted to influence the murder investigation before authorities had even pieced together the full story. That discovery changes the direction of the case. It suggests he was not merely reacting to events after the fact. He was already thinking about consequences, already considering what investigators might discover, and already trying to shape the story they would eventually hear. That behavior becomes increasingly difficult to dismiss as panic. Panic can cause someone to make a single reckless decision. But Daniel's actions appear connected, repeated, and purposeful. He had information, relationships, and opportunities, and he seemed determined to control how each one was understood. When detectives sit down with Daniel for questioning, he initially appears confident. He speaks as though he can guide the conversation, choosing what to emphasize and what to leave unanswered. His answers seem designed to sound reasonable, even when the questions become more specific. But the longer the interview continues, the harder that strategy becomes to maintain. Investigators begin comparing his statements against the evidence already collected. One explanation conflicts with a previous explanation. A detail he presents as certain no longer matches what detectives know. Another answer creates a new contradiction. Slowly, the confidence starts disappearing. Daniel changes his story several times. Each revision may solve one immediate problem, but it creates another. The more he tries to repair the narrative, the more obvious the gaps become. Detectives do not need to force the truth out of him all at once. They simply keep returning to the facts, allowing his own words to collide with evidence. And that is where the investigation reaches its most important stage. The evidence is no longer being viewed as separate pieces of suspicious behavior. Together, the lies, the manipulation, the hidden relationship, and the attempts to influence the investigation create a single picture. Detectives now have something Daniel cannot easily explain away, a pattern showing that control was not incidental to his behavior. It was the thread connecting nearly every decision he made. The pattern is impossible to ignore. Finally, they confront him directly with what they have uncovered. The carefully constructed identity he had maintained begins to unravel in real time. The devoted husband, secret lover, and calculated manipulator can no longer remain separate characters. They are all part of the same man, and investigators are now seeing the connections clearly. For Daniel, the moment marks the collapse of control he had worked so hard to preserve. For everyone else, it brings the case closer to the question that matters most. What really happened, and how far was Daniel willing to go to keep the truth hidden? The collapse of Daniel's carefully constructed story does not end the damage. In many ways, it is only the beginning of the aftermath. The investigation has exposed the truth, but truth does not automatically repair what deception destroyed. Rachel is left standing inside the wreckage of a life she thought was real. The affair becomes public, and with every new detail, another piece of her marriage disappears. The home, the memories, and the promises she once believed in are suddenly connected to lies she never saw coming. Maya was not just another person in the story. She was her sister, someone Rachel believed would always remain part of her life. The revelation of the affair therefore creates a second wound, one that cannot be separated from the first. Rachel has lost her marriage, her trust in people close to her, and the sisterly relationship she once believed could survive anything. Knowing the truth does not make that pain disappear. If anything, it forces Rachel to remember ordinary moments differently. A conversation that once seemed harmless may now carry another meaning. A late night, an unexplained absence, or a message Daniel quickly deleted can become a memory filled with questions. She begins to understand that the warning signs were not invisible. They were simply buried beneath the version of Daniel she wanted to believe. And Maya's story can no longer be reduced to a scandal surrounding an affair. What happened reveals something much darker about the power of manipulation. Daniel understood how secrecy could isolate people, how shame could make someone afraid to speak, and how fear could be turned into a tool of control. The longer those forces remained hidden, the more room he had to shape the lives of everyone around him. The final courtroom revelations establish that the murder did not emerge from one isolated argument or one sudden moment of anger. It grew through a chain of deception, betrayal, coercion, and escalating desperation. Each secret created another problem. Each lie required another lie to protect it. Eventually, the story Daniel had constructed became too complicated to control. For Rachel, hearing those revelations means facing a truth she never wanted to accept. The danger had been growing long before the final act of violence. The murder was the visible ending of a pattern that had begun quietly, through hidden messages, divided loyalties, emotional pressure, and calculated deception. Months later, Rachel returns to the place where Maya's life changed forever. She does not come looking for answers from Daniel. She comes because she needs to face the memory of her sister without allowing the worst moment of Maya's life to become the only thing she remembers. She carries no flowers for Daniel. Instead, she brings something that belonged to Maya, a small reminder of the woman her sister was before the secrets, before the investigation, and before everything became evidence. Standing there, Rachel thinks about the first warning sign she ignored. It was something much smaller, Daniel deleting a message from Maya. At the time, Rachel accepted his explanation because believing him was easier than imagining what might be hidden behind that screen. Now she understands how dangerous that moment was. Not because one deleted message caused everything that followed, but because it represented the beginning of a pattern. A secret was created, protected, and then allowed to grow. Daniel believed he could control it. He believed he could control Maya, Rachel, and eventually the story itself. But secrets rarely remain obedient forever. The final lesson of the case is not simply about the crime itself. It is about what can happen when manipulation is mistaken for love, when silence is mistaken for peace, and when fear becomes a weapon inside relationships that should have offered safety. By the time the truth becomes impossible to hide, the damage may already be permanent. Rachel looks once more at what she has brought for Maya, then turns away from the place where so much was lost. She cannot undo the past. She cannot restore her marriage. She cannot bring her sister back. But she can refuse to let Daniel's version of events define Maya's entire story. And so the case closes not with celebration, but with remembrance. An old family photograph shows Rachel and Maya smiling together, frozen in a moment before betrayal entered their lives. Beside it rests evidence from the investigation, a stark reminder of everything that came afterward. The contrast says what words cannot. The marriage was built on a secret. The murder exposed it. And the truth destroyed everyone who had tried to bury it. Yet beneath that final silence remains one deeper warning. Some crimes begin with violence. Others begin much earlier, with a secret someone believes they can control. I prefer this response.